Welcome everybody. What I'm going to show you here now is how to take a fraction and multiply it by another fraction. But what we've been doing this year is making sure that you understand what this actually looks like using models. So I'm first going to show you how to model this equation, and then I'm going to show you how to actually go ahead and solve it. Alright, so we have 2/3 times 1/5. And just the same exact way we were finding part of a whole, uh, we're basically finding part of a part. What this really means is we're finding 2/3 of 1/5. So I'll show you how to model this. What we were doing in class is we were taking a rectangle that we created, and we were dividing it first by our second factor here, and we were dividing into fifths. So I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to make 5 parts. I'm doing it by hand and I'm trying to do it as equal as possible, but you'll get the idea. Alright, so here's 3 parts. This would be 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We divided that into fifths. Alright, so we want this rectangle to represent 1/5. Well, so I'm going to shade in 1 of the 5 parts that I made from the rectangle. So this is what 1/5 looks like. Now, if we need to find 2/3 of this 1/5, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now break this rectangle up into thirds. Well, if I took this rectangle and divided it into thirds, I'm going to put a line here and a line here. And I'm going to shade in 2/3 of that rectangle. So here's 2/3, this is 1/3 shaded in, and here's our another third shaded in. Alright. Now, what I did was, when I divided the rectangle into fifths, and then I divided it into thirds, really what I did was I created 15 parts to this rectangle. Now, the key part here is where these overlap. These overlap in 2 boxes. Alright, therefore, 2/3 of 1/5 equals 2/15. Now, let me show you how we would actually solve this problem. If you're multiplying 2 fractions, it's very simple. All we need to do is we need to multiply the numerator times the numerator, the denominator times the denominator. When we were adding and subtracting fractions, we had to take the denominators and find the least common multiple and write equivalent fractions so the denominators were the same. Multiplying fractions seems to be a lot simpler. It doesn't matter if they don't have the same numerator. It doesn't matter if they don't have the same denominator. All you do is you multiply the numerator, denominator, and as you can see, we modeled it properly because we're getting the same answer as we would get in here if we just went ahead and solved it. It would equal 2/15. Let me show you another example. Here's our second example. 3/4 times 1/2. Once again, understand that 3/4 times 1/2 really means 3/4 of 1/2. So here's my rectangle. I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm first going to divide it into halves because I'm focusing first on my second number, my second factor. In order to break it up into halves, very simply, I put one line right down that middle, and now my rectangle is divided into halves. To represent 1/2, all I would have to do here is I would have to shade in one of the 2 parts, which would give me 1/2. Now I take this 1/2 and I would now have to divide this 1/2 into 4 parts because I'm going to find the eventually 3/4 of this 1/2. So I look at my first denominator is 4. I'm going to divide that into 4 equal parts, or as equal as possible, as I could do by hand. Alright, now I created 4 separate sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to shade in 3 out of those 4 parts. This is 1 part, 2 out of the 4, and 3 out of the 4. So in blue represents 3/4, in pink represents the 1/2. Now the parts that overlap, you see right here, the boxes that overlap. Here's one box that overlaps, here's 2 boxes, here's 3 boxes. Now 3 is going to equal the numerator, but what's the denominator? Well, when we took this rectangle, we divided it into halves, then we took the rectangle and then divided it into fourths. We created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 separate boxes. We basically took the rectangle and divided it into eighths. Well, that would give us our denominator. The part that's overlapped equals 3/8. And we could see that if we went to actually multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. You always have to make sure, though, you're putting your fraction in simplest form. Ask yourself, are there any common factors of 3 and 8? The answer is no. 3 only has 2 factors, 1 and 3, and none of those, well, 1 other than 1, multiplies by another number to equal 8. So 3/8 is in simplest form and is your answer. And that's how you model the multiplication of fractions and actually solve them.